I'm Rabbi Ammi Hirsch of the Stephen Wise Free Synagogue in New York, and you're listening to In These Times.
There is, in the liberal landscape in Europe and in America, a whole part of the landscape which no longer deserves to be qualified as liberal. They are fascist, or they are illiberal, or they are something else, a word which has to be invented, but not liberal. I am a liberal.
Bernard-Henri Levy, known as BHL, is a world-renowned liberal Jewish-French philosopher, author, and filmmaker. Born in Algeria in 1948, he was one of the founders of the New Philosophers movement, and today, as one of the West's foremost intellectuals, he passionately defends democracy and humanism while vigorously opposing totalitarianism and fascism in all its forms. BHL has covered global conflicts and the world's forgotten wars through his many books, documentaries, and articles, while participating in peace efforts and engaging with Israeli leaders from Menachem Begin to Yitzhak Rabin. A columnist for international publications, he's written over 40 books, including his recent Israel Alone, published by Wicked Sun, the Post Hill Press imprint that also published my latest book. And that's how I learned that he was in New York City for a brief visit from my publisher. And I asked him to stop by my office. He generously agreed, and together we recorded this 30-minute conversation. Bernard-Henri Levy, thank you very much for being here. I've admired your work and your career for decades, so welcome to In These Times.
Thank you to host me in this famous podcast.
You wrote a very important book just now in the aftermath of October 7th. Before we get to the book, if I can ask you just to look back at your career, and you're a philosopher, you're an intellectual. The standing and status of public intellectuals in Europe and in France is different than in the United States. But what is distinctive about you, I think even in European terms, is that you're very active in social justice work and public affairs. Could you just tell us, of course, you follow current events and you're a European in every sense of the word. How would you characterize the mood now in Europe, and in particular in France? Are you pleased with where Europe is? Do you think Europe is relatively tranquil, or are you worried about the future of Europe?
I'm really worried. I'm worried for the future of the Jews in Europe. I'm worried for the future of the Jews, therefore for the future of Europe itself. Mm-hmm.
The status of the Jew is a sort of barometer to the health of Europe.
Absolute benchmark, absolute parameter. If tomorrow the Jews were to disappear again, they nearly disappeared during the Holocaust. If something like that, even in a smooth way, had to happen, it would be the end of Europe. Because the culture of Europe is so intermingled, it's so mixed with the spirit of Judaism. Mm-hmm. Europe without Judaism would not be Europe.
And France, which has the largest Jewish population in Europe, we keep on reading here that the French Jews are fearful and they feel like they're under attack, and there's increasing anti-Semitism. Is that true?
It is true. It is not hopeless, but it is a big concern.
Is it getting worse?
It's getting worse because now we have, for example, a whole political party, alas, a leftist one, coming from the left and even the extreme left, which is openly anti-Semitic. And this is not new. It happened already 1 century ago during the Dreyfus affair. We had half of the workers' movement, which was anti-Semitic. But this tradition went into the cold, into the shadow for a long time, and it is coming back. The chief of this party is called Mr. Mélenchon, and he's a devoted anti-Semite.
I want to get to your book. It's just now published. It's called Israel Alone, and it's all about October 7th and the aftermath of October 7th. Why'd you title the book Israel Alone? What do you mean by that?
I mean that in order to fight, to wage this fight against Hamas today, maybe tomorrow Hezbollah, and in the background Iran, Israel is much more alone in this current battle. Whatever are the mistakes of Israel, the question is not that. We can speak of the mistakes also, but for the moment, they are waging a battle, which is a battle for all of us, which is a battle for the free world, for the values of liberty, of solidarity, and so on. They are more alone than we were, us, the French, when we liberated Mosul with the Kurds and the Iraqis, and more alone than you were, you Americans, when you liberated Afghanistan in 2001 after September 11. America had a big coalition in support. France, after Bataclan and Charlie Hebdo, had a big coalition to support. Israel, after Hamas, which is not really different from Al-Qaeda and from ISIS, is alone.
How do you explain that? I of course agree that I felt by the sundown of October 7th that as much as this was a test for Israel and the Palestinians, it eventually would be a test for Western civilization itself. I agree with that, and I feel more strongly about that than I did even on October 7th. Why don't others see that? Because if they did, Israel wouldn't be alone in the way that you define it.
One explanation, which is a little sad, but which has its part of truth, is that we are coward. ISIS was not a big deal. ISIS was alone. There was not a coalition behind ISIS. It was just ISIS. Powerful, Mosul, Raqqa. Al-Qaeda, terrible, September 11, a huge mass crime, but they were alone also. Hamas today is not alone. It's the reverse of what I said before. Hamas means, first of all, Hezbollah, Houthi, and so on, but Hamas means Iran, which is really pulling the threads of Hamas. It means the Muslim Brotherhood in general. It means Russia. I give some elements of proof, or at least indication in my book, that Russia and Putin were not out of that game of October 7. It means Turkey, the dreamers of a new Ottoman Empire, who the Saturday following October 7, just after, expressed Erdogan joy, support, encouragement to Hamas. So maybe we are just afraid of this big coalition which is behind Hamas. Hamas is apparently a little confetti, a little point, it's nothing. Except that when you say Hamas, you say Iran, Russia, Turkey, Qatar, a Muslim Brotherhood, maybe China, we don't know. So it's a huge force.
Can I ask you about, you're a keen observer of America, and you love this country.
Yeah.
You've written about your affection and your hope and your belief in the role of the United States. Do you feel that this current administration's support for Israel since October 7th was lacking in some way?
It's complicated. I don't doubt the intensity of the feelings and of the personal love of the current president for Israel. I'm sure he knows Israel, he understands Israel, and he loves Israel. After that, for political reasons, probably he does not do enough. I give you an example. few days ago, the debate, Trump, Kamala Harris, who is for the moment, I hope she will be more, but for the moment she's the vice president. She said, Ukraine has to win and will win, which I agree fully. Ukraine has to win. It's a must. It's a duty. She did not say Israel has to win.
Mm-hmm.
She said Israel has the right to defend. I hope so. And this is a minimum right to self-defense. But why did she not say Israel has to win?
Why, if Western civilization itself is at stake? That was my question before, too. Why?
Western civilization is at stake. Stability of the area is at stake. The destiny, not only of Western, the destiny of the Iranian women is at stake. The destiny of the Afghan journalist is at stake. The destiny of the brave Turkish lawyers fighting against Muslim Brotherhood in Turkey is at stake. So, for all these reasons, plus the survivors of Holocaust, plus the sons of the survivors it's an existential question for them. Israel has to win as much as Ukraine. And God knows if I love Ukraine. I'm a supporter of Ukraine. I directed myself on the ground, on the battlefield with my camera, 3 films about Ukraine. So I love that she said that. Ukraine has to win. But I regret that she did not say the symmetrical. Israel has to win. Hamas is as bad as Putin. And by the way, it is the same. We know that Putin knew before about the October 7 attack. We know for sure that in all the sessions of preparation of October 7, some in Beirut, some in Iran, and maybe some in Moscow, people of the FSB, people, high-ranking officers of the entourage of Putin who were involved. We know that, so it's the same. So I regret that, of course. I don't doubt that the president and the vice president are real lovers of Israel. But they stay halfway.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to what you think is the root dynamic of that. Is it all political? And of course, we're in the midst of an election campaign. And
it's political. They are shied, intimidated by those ignorants, by those politically illiterate who keep on repeating that Israel is a state of apartheid, that Israel is practicing genocide, and that Israel is a colonial country. 3 propositions which are just stupid. I know what is colonialism. I spent all my life fighting against colonialism and imperialism. Israel is a fruit of a war of decolonization. Mm-hmm. Israel is a result of a process of fight against imperialism, the British one, at that time, and even in a way, the German one, which was losing the ground, who lost, but during the 40s, there was a risk of a Nazi empire. Israel fought against all imperialism. I know what is a genocide. I was on the ground in Darfur when there was a genocide. I was one of the first to go in Rwanda and to report about Rwanda when there was a real huge genocide. I know what it is. I know the smell of genocide. In Israel, there is not even the beginning of an attempt or of a project of genocide. Nobody projects except a few extreme right morons. Everywhere you have this sort of guy, but nobody in the army, nobody in the real civil service, they even think so it's genocide. And apartheid, I know what is apartheid. I've been an early militant in my country, in America sometimes, against the real apartheid in South Africa. Israel is the contrary. one citizen out of 5 is belongs to the Arab minority, has all 100% of the civic rights. There is no need for Rosa Parks or for Nelson Mandela in Israel. The Arab parties are in the parliament, and they are anti-Zionist, and they hate Israel sometimes, or not all, but they participate in the government, and they can have a judge in the super, all of that. So there is in America and in France a trend nourished, nurtured by ignorance, and who certainly intimidates those who want good for Israel in the bottom of their heart, but don't dare. They're wrong, because you have to dare when you are a politician, a man, a woman, or a man of state. You have to dare what you think.
You, in your book, you called October 7th an event. You described it as an event, and I think you drew some comparison to, for example, 9/11, which is an event that just descends on the world in seemingly out of the blue or unexpectedly. Could you elaborate on that, what you mean by October 7th being an event?
Something that never happened, something that nothing predicts, like a black swan in economy, and something which remolds the whole game, the future, and also the past, by the way. An event with a capital E writes a new future, which was not on the rails, and in a way re-improvises the past. An event with a capital E gives a different significance to a lot of events in the past. After October 7, we see in another light the reality of the Hamas, the reality of other Palestinian groups, the essence of the hatred which was boiling there. Some pieces of the past appeared in a new light. This is an event. And of course, it designs a completely new future.
It's like 9/11 led to the invasion of other countries and a 20-year war, and it's still going, arguably. You write that Israel was forced into this war.
Evidently. Israel committed other mistakes. Certainly, we could speak of that, but Israel withdrew from Gaza 20 years before, never expected to go back, and maybe, certainly, Israel underestimated the evilness of Hamas, of Yahya Sinwar, but was not ready for the war, that's sure.
You consider it a war of no choice. It was imposed on Israel, and Israel, as you said, Israel has to win this war.
What can you do when your country is invaded? When your citizens, the first duty of a state is to protect the citizens. When 1,200 of your citizens are killed, put it in the proportion of America. If it were America, you imagine the figure. And when the killer says it is just the beginning, we will repeat that as often as we can. Mm-hmm. You have the duty to protect your co-citizens. And you had one big enemy, Iran. Again, it's a fact. Israel never declared a war to Iran. Iran decided in a genocidal spirit that Israel has no right to exist. This is the official line of Iran, not of the young women who shout in the streets, women life and dignity and freedom. But the Ayatollah, their official line is that Palestine has to be free from the river to the sea, and that Israel has to be eradicated from the surface of the earth. So when the program begins to be implemented by one of the proxy of Iran, what do? You offer your throat to the knife, or you react. Israel was compelled. It would have been a mistake not to react, and it would be a tragedy not to win.
How do you define winning?
I define winning by the military forces of Hamas to be broken, Iran, Russia, or Turkey. They have to understand that the game is over, that Israel won. And 3, all those around Israel, but also in the whole world, also in Paris, also in New York, all those who considered that the Hamas was a group of resistance. Sometimes, I'm sorry to say, but because considering that they were heroes and that it was a good way, that they were right, that peaceful ways had been unuseful, and that murder and slaughter or rape were the good way. All these people have to understand that it was a dead end. That's his victory in doing. So victory of the commanders of Hamas, victory by rebuilding the deterrence toward the real enemies of Israel, and victory by telling clearly to all those who have the temptation to consider the pogromists of October 7 as heroes, to put shame on them. This is what happened in 1945 with Germany. Victory meant capitulation of the officers, but it meant also that the 50 million of Germans suddenly woke up.
On some level, I don't think that we're that close to persuading I don't even know what to call them, pro-Palestinians. Because of the reasons that you're voicing, I don't think this is a pro-Palestinian view to be supportive of Hamas and, the destruction of Israel and the river to the sea and so forth.
I'm not so sure. I remember few days before the fall of Mosul, before Mosul was taken by the Iraqi, French, and the American Air Force, few days before in Iraq, you had a lot of supporters of ISIS. Mm-hmm. I was there filming. Overnight, they disappeared. They cut the beard. They changed mind. They began to say, dozens of interviews, they began to say, no, I've never been ISIS. I was just forced, terrorized, a gun on the head, and so on and so on. Now, this sort of turnover happens quickly, like in Germany. When you have, I hate war, but when you have a war, and when you are compelled to fight it, you have to win, and winning means that your enemies capitulate even morally, that they understand that it was a huge mistake, that it was committing suicide.
And can you envision again, I don't really know what to call them, pro-Hamas, or call them, to be generous in the way they define themselves, pro-Palestinian supporters in the West and also in the West Bank and in Gaza. Do you envision soon or a scenario where Israel's victory would be so overwhelming that they will drop their opposition to a two-state solution, to Zionism? At the root of what's driving them is their opposition to any Jewish state, not simply this Jewish state or this Jewish government or these borders.
For the moment, that is the situation. And when I said that the event with capital E did shed a new light even in the past, I was thinking of that. We understand now that a lot of partners of Israel had practiced a double thinking, and in fact, in the depths of themselves, they did not want any two-state solution. They did not want Israel at all. But this can change, and it can change quickly. You can see again, if it proves to be that these ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hamas adventures are catastrophic for their promoters, for the Arab world, it can change. You can have a real awakening of people thinking, new generation. At the end of the day, we were mistaken. Why not make agreement with this little country? Very little. Israel, honestly, it's like, I don't know, so mostly the smallest state in America, probably. Or two French departments is. So is it so impossible that the neighbors of Israel, at the end of the day, think, okay, let's agree deeply. And it is not impossible. We have already some states, some Arabic states, who did the process, and they did it with good heart. One country which I know rather well, Morocco, they made Abraham Accords, not by force, not by rules, not only by interest. They did it also with the heart. They understood.
You know, it's inspiring to listen to you. You define yourself as a liberal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not for me to sit with a philosopher and, talk about the definition of liberalism. But I'm a liberal too, and I've considered it always a kind of state of mind, even more than certain basic principles. And one of the approaches of liberalism is in the belief that change can occur even quickly, that conservatives tend to be more skeptical about the rapidity of change and the depth of change. And liberals believe, that's why liberals supported the Oslo Accords and why liberals believe that you can reason with even your enemy, and even your enemy can change. Conservatives are much more skeptical.
The enemy has to change. He has to change. And I have to be sure that he changes.
Yeah, so you want to be a tough liberal, not a liberal that has no grounding in reality.
I'm not a lamb liberal.
Yeah. You described Hamas as radical evil. Is there a distinction in your mind between radical evil and just other forms of evil? What makes Hamas distinctively radically evil in comparison to all the other evil in the world?
Evil without any other target than committing evil. To commit evil in order to take power is one thing. To commit evil in order to reconquer a territory is one thing. October 7, it was no question of territory, no question of power, no question of justice, no question of nothing. It was a question to kill as many Jews as possible. It was a question of raping a woman while another rapist was cutting her breast. This is what the New York Times reported a few weeks after. This sort of, what is the reason behind that? Violating a lady while cutting the face methodically and finally shooting a pistol blow in intimate parts. What is the reason for that? Except the pure pleasure, the pure joy, pure of committing evil.
So it's evil for its own sake, with no...
Evil for its own sake. No other passion that committing evil. This is radical evil.
You write about Palestinian civilian deaths. It's something that I think any feeling person, no matter what they believe about the justice of the war, grieves over. And you poignantly write that a death is a death is a death. An innocent civilian is an innocent civilian. And all people are, from a Jewish perspective, are endowed with equal dignity and equal worth, and all were created in the divine image. And yet you insist that the responsibility for these deaths fall on Hamas. Could you elaborate on that a little?
The sorrow is every face of a Palestinian child, which I have been unfortunate enough to see on internet and so on, haunts my nights, really, as if it were my relative. But if you jump to the question of responsibility, the responsibility does not belong to the one who gave warning, proposed an evacuation. The responsibility belongs to the one who put the civilian ahead, who prevented him to go away, who said that enough is enough. They are responsible. What can I say? Even if the bullet is Israeli.
You write that Israel is a country like no other?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Many things. I gave you an example before. I don't know any Western country where you have such a strong minority, 20% of people who don't endorse fully the creed of the state, which is Zionism. Israel, please or not, is a Zionist state. You have 20% of the population that does not endorse Zionism. They are citizens. They have full civic rights. They are the MPs and so on and so on. If you know another country, tell me which. In Europe, I don't know. In America, same. An American party who would not like, or not even bless, but like the flag of America would not enter into Capitol Hill. In Israel, you can be an Arab anti-Zionist party and make the king.
You visit American campuses a lot, right? And you interact with young people too. You taught, you enjoy spending time with young people. I don't know how keenly you've been able to observe American campuses in the last year. And I'll ask you also not only in connection with, that's the higher education liberal establishment, but there are other liberal entities that you actually write about in the book, NGOs, international legal entities, the United Nations, feminist groups, social justice groups, who just responded to October 7th in such a disappointing way. As liberals, it's betrayal.
It's the biggest betrayal of one's values, which I saw in all my life.
Were you surprised by that?
The feminist groups who took the Jewish women, offended, martyrized, raped because they were Jews.
Do you think their reaction was because these were Jews and Israelis who were attacked and not any other group of women in the world?
Come on, they were the only one to be driven out of the demonstrations, the only one.
And that's anti-Semitism, right?
This is pure anti-Semitism.
Do you think the left, that part of I'd like you to help us understand the difference between liberalism as a profound liberal thinker and this kind of hard left, or progressivism, or identity politics, whatever you want to call it.
Identity politics is not, they think that they are the climax, the most advanced form of liberalism. They are not the identity politics. They are turning their back.
They're illiberal in many respects.
Yes, they're illiberal. To be a liberal means to believe in universal values, to believe in the unity of mankind, to believe that everyone, whatever the gender, the circumstances of the time, has the same rights. Those in the campuses who preach for identity politics think the opposite.
So if it's being exclusively driven by this kind of anti-Semitism, first of all, I think, by definition, an anti-Semitic ideology cannot be liberal. And so does it cast a shadow on this entire ideology, that there's something rotten? It's not only, this particular leader, or, this head of the United Nations, or this feminist organization that, could have acted in a better way, or this university president, but is there something systemically rotten at the core of this ideology?
I don't like the idea of anything being systemic. These people say that there is a systemic racism in the American French institution, which is, this way of thinking denies any possible goodwill of a single man or a single woman. We have each of us the power to say no, to change the order of things and so on. So nothing is completely systemic. But there is, in the liberal landscape in Europe and in America, a whole part of the landscape which no longer deserves to be qualified as liberal. They are fascist, or they are illiberal, or they are something else, a word which has to be invented, but not liberal. I am a liberal.
My last question for you is, what's your advice to American Jews and supporters of Israel in the West?
Resist. Don't give up. You will win.
With that, Bernard-Henri Levy, thank you very much for agreeing to spend this time with us, and we wish you well on all your future works.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Bernard-Henri Levy writes in his book, Israel Alone, of the yes, but phenomenon. By this, he means the effort towards the methodical deconstruction of the radical evil of October 7. Yes, but, he writes, is the indispensable tool used by professional excusers of evil. Remember the context, they plead. The most prominent of the contextualizers was none other than the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, who, less than 3 weeks after October 7, ritually recited his condemnation of Hamas, but moved quickly to his main point. The attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum, he argued. The Secretary General then proceeded to describe the grievances of the Palestinian people from what he called a suffocating occupation, as if the Palestinians themselves do not share responsibility for the hardships they endure. Peace was offered to them from 1947 onwards. They have rejected coexistence every day of the century-old struggle. It's astonishing to me that no moral agency is ever assigned to Palestinians. I encountered this yes, but argument firsthand in my interfaith dialogue group with prominent New York Jewish, Christian, and Muslim clergy. We've been friends and allies, partners in the work of social repair for many years. In an impassioned discussion about why it was so easy for our group to condemn the Pittsburgh massacre of Jews praying in a synagogue, but that we were eerily silent about the massacre of 100 times more Jews in their beds in Israel, men, women, children, grandparents, babies, Holocaust survivors, peace activists. One of my colleagues, after ritual condemnation of Hamas's atrocities, said these words that I don't think I will ever forget. What did you expect? The Native Americans also scalped the white European invaders and hung their heads on poles. And do you condemn the slave revolts against their white masters? He said this to me, a descendant of the people who first gave the world the concept that slavery is an offense against God. He said this to me with no shame and no sense of humility. There are those who simply deny that the massacres happened. They were Israeli propaganda. Others seek to minimize the atrocity. Well, it wasn't 1,200 people, it was far fewer. Or Israel herself killed most of its own civilians. For years I pondered how Holocaust denial could be so widespread, how so many people believed that the Holocaust was a hoax. But now we see in real time how it happens. It's only been a year, and the October 7 denial machine is in full force and gaining traction. But the more sophisticated of the whitewashers use the yes, but argument. Yes, the killings happened on October 7, but they didn't happen in a vacuum. What about Israeli apartheid, which, by the way, is a malicious and vicious libel? What about the white, racist, oppressive, privileged, colonial Zionist movement? Never mind that most Israeli Jews are of Middle East descent and are the descendants of those who fled to Israel as refugees from their persecution in Arab and Muslim lands with nothing but the clothes on their back. You can criticize Israeli policies all you want. You can object to Israeli military strategy and give us your learned opinions on how you would have conducted the military campaign differently. All the while, evading millions of Palestinian human shields and freeing the hostages in a tunnel system more elaborate than the London Underground. But I think it's important to remember and never to forget what actually happened on October 7. It is imperative now more than ever to counter the yes, but phenomenon. No Israeli woke up on October 7 asking himself, how will I make war in Gaza today? Israel was invaded. October 7 happened on the Israeli side of the internationally recognized border. These are not disputed lands, unless you are among those for whom Israel's existence in any territory in the land of Israel is disputed. 1,200 people were massacred in cold blood, the majority of them civilians. Hamas is a terrorist organization, recognized as such by many countries, as if such recognition is even needed after October 7. They sexually assaulted, brutalized, and raped women, men too. They slaughtered babies and young people. They murdered whole families, shooting parents in front of their children and children in front of their parents. They took 250 people hostages. That word has been sanitized in the past year, partially because the negotiations involve trading hostages for Palestinian prisoners as if they are on equal moral footing. The prisoners Hamas wants committed violent offenses against Israelis. Their hands are smeared in blood. If the price of releasing the Israeli hostages is to free some of these terrorist barbarians, we hold our nose, pay the ransom, and bring the hostages home. But remember who these hostages are. They are civilians who were sleeping in their beds. They were stolen from their homes and illegally and immorally held in the most brutal conditions. The 6 Israelis murdered by their captors in September could not even stand up straight in the tunnel. They were extremely malnourished and hadn't seen the sunshine in weeks. Even to breathe in that tunnel was difficult. Isn't there a limit to what we will tolerate as a species? Even if you believe your grievances are just, aren't there acts that are so beyond the pale that they mandate only one moral response, unequivocal condemnation? And doesn't humanity's long climb up from the savagery of the survival of the fittest require us to fight against those who would take us back to the Dark Ages, a state of nature described by Thomas Hobbes as a war of all against all, a world of no arts, no letters, no society, and worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death, and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Make no mistake, Israel's war with Hamas is a struggle for decency and morality. It is no less important to the West than the Middle East. Until next time, this is In These Times.